The wind howled like a hungry wolf across the Texas plains, and Amelia Jenkins knew with a sinking certainty that this November storm of 1883 would be the worst she had ever seen. She stood on the porch of her small farmhouse just outside Gonzales, Texas, watching the sky darken to an unnatural bruised purple. At 22 years old, she had been running this farm alone for 3 years now, ever since her father died from fever, and her mother followed him to the grave 6 months later from a broken heart. The land was all she had left, these 40 acres of stubborn Texas soil that fought her every season but somehow kept producing enough to keep her fed and clothed. The chickens were already putting themselves to bed, sensing the coming danger in their bones. Amelia pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and stepped off the porch, her boots crunching on the dried grass. She needed to get the cattle into the barn, needed to secure the shutters, needed to bring in more firewood before the storm hit in full force. She was halfway to the barn when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching fast. Her hand instinctively went to the rifle she kept propped by the door, but she had left it inside. Out here, a woman alone had to be careful. Not everyone who came riding up had good intentions. But the rider who emerged from the gathering gloom was leading 2 horses, one of them limping badly. He pulled up short when he saw her, removing his hat in a gesture of respect that immediately eased some of her tension. "Madam," he called out, his voice deep and steady despite the wind that was now picking up with alarming speed. "I'm sorry to intrude, but my horse threw a shoe about a mile back. This storm is coming in faster than I expected, and I was hoping I might take shelter in your barn until it passes." Amelia studied him carefully. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that even in the dim light she could see were a startling shade of blue. His clothes were worn but clean, his saddle well maintained. Everything about him spoke of a man who took care of his belongings and knew how to work hard. "What's your name?" she asked, having to raise her voice now as the wind whipped around them. "Nathan Parker, madam. I've been working at the Morrison Ranch about 15 miles north, but I'm heading south to San Antonio for the winter. The Morrisons can vouch for me if you need references." He gave her a small smile that softened his weathered face. "Though I suppose that doesn't help you much right this moment." The first snowflake hit Amelia's cheek, and she made her decision. Snow in Gonzales was rare, and snow coming down this hard and fast meant the temperature was dropping dangerously. She might be cautious, but she was not cruel. "The barn is over there," she said, pointing. "You can stable your horses, but I need help getting my cattle in first. Can you ride that horse of yours, or is she too lame?" Nathan was already swinging back into the saddle. "She can manage a bit more if we go slow. Where are your cattle?" "South pasture, about a quarter mile out. Follow me." Amelia ran back to the house and grabbed her own horse, a sturdy mare named Daisy, and within minutes they were riding hard toward the pasture. The snow was falling in earnest now, thick white flakes that seemed to come from every direction at once. She could barely see Nathan riding beside her, but she knew this land like she knew her own heartbeat. The cattle were already bunching together nervously, their breath steaming in the rapidly cooling air. There were only 10 of them, all she had left after selling most of the herd last spring to pay off her father's debts. Nathan seemed to assess the situation instantly and moved to the far side of the herd without needing instruction. Together, they began driving the cattle toward the barn. It should have been a simple task, but the storm had other ideas. The wind was now screaming across the plains, driving the snow horizontal and making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. One of the young steers spooked and tried to bolt, but Nathan was there, cutting him off and turning him back toward the group with the ease of someone who had spent his whole life working cattle. By the time they got the animals into the barn, Amelia was shaking from cold and exhaustion. Her fingers were so numb she could barely manage the latch on the barn door. Nathan's hands appeared beside hers, larger and steadier, and together they secured it against the howling wind. Inside the barn, the sudden quiet was almost shocking. The cattle settled into the stalls, and Nathan's horses stood patiently while he removed their saddles and began checking the lame one's hoof. Amelia leaned against a post, trying to catch her breath and failing. The cold had seeped deep into her bones. "You need to get inside," Nathan said, looking up from his examination of the horse's leg. His face was red from the cold, his hair plastered to his forehead with melted snow. "This storm is going to be bad. Real bad." "I know," Amelia managed through chattering teeth. "I need to check the chickens first, make sure their coop is secure." "I will do it. Where is it?" "Behind the house, but you do not have to, madam, with respect. You are about to freeze solid. Get inside, get warm, and I will secure the animals. Then, if you are willing, I would appreciate being allowed to wait out this storm in your barn." Amelia wanted to argue, but another violent shiver ran through her body, and she knew he was right. She nodded and stumbled toward the barn door. Nathan was there immediately, helping her push it open against the wind. The house was only about 50 yards away, but it might as well have been a mile. The storm had transformed the familiar landscape into an alien white wilderness. "You will never find the chicken coop in this," she shouted over the wind. "Just come to the house. We will deal with the chickens when the wind dies down." But Nathan was already shaking his head. "Which direction?" "Directly behind the house, maybe 20 yards. There is a rope from the back porch that I tied last winter. It goes straight to the coop." He nodded, and together they struggled toward the house. The temperature had dropped so fast that Amelia's wet clothes were starting to stiffen. Her lungs burned with each breath of the icy air. She had lived in Texas her whole life, and she had never experienced anything like this. They reached the porch, and Amelia fumbled with the door. Once inside, the relative warmth of the house hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled and would have fallen if Nathan had not caught her arm. "Sit down," he commanded, guiding her to the chair by the stove. "Where is your firewood?" "I have a little inside, more outside in the lean-to on the east side of the house." Her teeth were still chattering so hard she could barely speak. "But you do not need to. Where are your driest clothes?" He was already moving, checking the stove, adding wood from the small pile she kept in the wooden box beside it. "Upstairs, in the trunk at the foot of my bed. But please, let me stay there." His voice was firm but not unkind. "I am going to get the firewood, check the chickens, and then I want you changed into dry clothes before you catch your death." "Understood." There was something in his tone that brooked no argument, a natural authority that came from years of taking charge in difficult situations. Amelia found herself nodding meekly, too cold and exhausted to protest further. Nathan disappeared up the narrow stairs and returned moments later with her heaviest dress and a thick shawl. He handed them to her without meeting her eyes, a courtesy she appreciated. "Change by the stove. I will be back soon." And then he was gone, back out into the storm. Amelia struggled out of her wet clothes, her fingers so numb she could barely work the buttons. She could hear the wind screaming around the house like a living thing, rattling the shutters and howling down the chimney. She managed to get into the dry dress and wrapped the shawl around herself, then added more wood to the stove with shaking hands. She had no idea how long Nathan was gone. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When the door finally burst open, he stumbled inside with an armload of firewood, his face so red from the cold it looked burned. He kicked the door shut behind him and dropped the wood into the box, then leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "The chickens are as secure as I could make them," he said between breaths. "The coop is solid, they should be fine. I brought as much wood as I could carry. That lean-to is already starting to drift over." Amelia stood up, still unsteady but feeling more human now that she was dry and warming up. "You need to get out of those wet clothes. You will freeze." Nathan looked down at himself as if just noticing that he was soaked through and covered in snow. "I will be fine in the barn." "You will die in the barn," Amelia corrected him sharply. "Look out the window." "This is not just a storm, this is a blizzard. I have never seen anything like it, not in all my years here." Nathan moved to the window and peered out. The world beyond was nothing but white. The snow was falling so thickly that the barn, just 50 yards away, was completely invisible. He was silent for a long moment. "I cannot stay in your house, madam. It would not be proper. You are here alone and I am a stranger." "Your reputation, my reputation will not matter much if I have to explain to the sheriff why I let a man freeze to death in my barn when I had a perfectly good house with a stove." Amelia moved to the stove and began heating water for coffee. "Besides, there is no one around for miles, and this storm is not going to let up any time soon. We will both have to make do with the situation as it is." Nathan still looked uncertain, shifting his weight from one foot to the other in a way that made water drip steadily onto her floor. Amelia sighed. "Mr. Parker, I understand your concern for propriety, and I appreciate it, but we are facing a life-or-death situation here. I would offer the same hospitality to anyone caught in this storm, and I would expect the same in return. Now please, there are some old clothes of my father's in the chest by the fireplace. They might not fit perfectly, but they are dry. Change into them before you catch pneumonia." The mention of her father seemed to decide it for him. He nodded slowly and moved to the chest, pulling out a worn but serviceable shirt and pair of trousers. "I will change in the other room. The bedroom is upstairs, first door on the right. Leave your wet clothes up there and we will hang them to dry later." While Nathan was upstairs, Amelia moved through the small house, checking the windows and doors, making sure everything was secure. The wind was so strong now that she could feel the walls shaking. She had weathered many storms in this house, but something about this one felt different, more dangerous. She set about making coffee and pulling out what food she had on hand. It was not much. She had been planning to go into town the next day for supplies, but there was salt pork, beans, some day-old bread, and a little butter. It would have to do. Nathan came back down the stairs, and Amelia had to suppress a smile. Her father had been a smaller man, and the trousers ended a good 2 inches above Nathan's ankles, while the shirt strained across his broader shoulders. But he was dry, and that was what mattered. "I know I look ridiculous," he said, catching her expression. "You look warm," Amelia replied diplomatically, handing him a cup of coffee. "That is all that matters right now." They sat at the small table, and for a few minutes neither spoke, just listening to the storm rage outside. The coffee was strong and hot, and Amelia felt it spreading warmth through her body. "Thank you," Nathan said finally, "for letting me stay. For your help with the horses and the cattle, you did not have to do any of that." "You helped me," Amelia pointed out. "I would never have gotten those cattle in by myself in time. I think we helped each other." He smiled at that, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. "I suppose we did." "So you have been working at the Morrison Ranch?" Amelia asked, curious despite herself. "I know the family. They have a good reputation." "They do, and they are good people to work for. I spent the last 8 months there, helping with the cattle drive and then with the fall roundup. but I am not a man who likes to stay in one place too long. I thought I would head south for the winter, maybe find work on one of the bigger ranches near San Antonio." "You are a drifter, then?" It was not an accusation, just an observation. Nathan considered this, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "I suppose I am. I have been moving around since I was 18. Never really had a reason to settle down anywhere." "Do you have family?" "Had. My parents died of cholera when I was 15. I have an older brother, but we lost touch years ago. He went west to California during the gold rush, and I never heard from him again." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but Amelia heard the loneliness underneath the words. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I lost my parents too. It is hard being alone." "It is," Nathan agreed. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Amelia felt suddenly self-conscious under his steady blue gaze. "How long have you been running this farm by yourself?" 3 years. "My father died first, then my mother. She just could not bear to be without him. They were very much in love." Amelia stared into her coffee. "I kept thinking someone would come along and tell me I could not do it, that a woman had no business running a farm alone. But no one ever did. Or maybe they did not care enough to bother." "You are doing a good job," Nathan said. "Your barn is solid, your fences are well maintained, your cattle look healthy. That takes a lot of work for one person." The unexpected compliment made Amelia flush with pleasure. "Thank you. It has not been easy, but this land is all I have. I cannot afford to let it fail." The wind chose that moment to slam into the house with such force that both of them jumped. Something heavy hit the side of the building with a crash, and Amelia ran to the window. Through the driving snow, she could barely make out the shape of what looked like part of the chicken coop roof sailing across the yard. "God help those poor chickens," she whispered. Nathan was beside her, his expression grim. "There is nothing we can do for them now. To go out in this would be suicide." Amelia knew he was right, but it did not make it any easier. Those chickens were part of her livelihood, their eggs a steady source of both food and small income. Losing them would be another blow she could ill afford. As if reading her thoughts, Nathan said gently, "Chickens are tough. They know how to huddle together for warmth. They will probably be fine." "Probably is not definitely." "No," he agreed, "but it is the best we can hope for right now." They stood together at the window, watching the storm. Amelia was acutely aware of Nathan's presence beside her. The solid warmth of him, the way he smelled of horses and leather and something else. Something distinctly masculine. It had been so long since she had been this close to another person, so long since she had had anyone to share her burdens with. "I should make some food," she said abruptly, stepping away from the window. "It is going to be a long night." Nathan helped her prepare a simple meal of beans and salt pork, moving around her small kitchen with surprising grace for such a large man. He seemed to sense what she needed before she asked for it, handing her the skillet when she reached for it, stirring the beans while she sliced the bread. It was domestic and comfortable, and Amelia found herself relaxing in his presence. They ate at the small table, and Nathan told her stories about his time on the Morrison Ranch, about a particularly stubborn bull and a hand who had been convinced the barn was haunted. Amelia found herself laughing, really laughing for the first time in months. It felt good, like stretching a muscle that had been cramped for too long. "What about you?" Nathan asked as they finished eating. "You must have some stories about running this place alone." Amelia thought about it. "Last spring, I had a fox that kept getting into the chicken coop. I tried everything to stop it, every trick I could think of, but that fox was clever. Finally, I decided to wait up all night with my rifle. I must have fallen asleep, because I woke up at dawn to find the fox sitting not 5 feet away from me, just staring. We looked at each other for a long moment, and then it turned and ran off. I never saw it again." "It probably decided you were too much trouble," Nathan said with a grin. "Or it felt sorry for me, falling asleep on watch like that." They cleaned up the dishes together, and Amelia tried not to think about how nice it was to have help, to have company. She had grown used to her solitude over the past 3 years, had even come to appreciate it in some ways. But tonight, with the storm raging outside and this stranger who no longer felt quite so strange working beside her, she realized how much she had missed simple human connection. The evening wore on, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. If anything, it seemed to be getting worse. The temperature inside the house was dropping despite the stove, and Amelia could see frost forming on the inside of the windows. She added more wood to the fire and pulled her shawl tighter. "This is unprecedented," she said, more to herself than to Nathan. "I have never seen a storm like this in Texas." "It is strange," Nathan agreed. He was standing by the window again, looking out into the white darkness. "I have seen blizzards up north in Wyoming and Montana, but never this far south, and never this early in the season." "Do you think it will let up by morning?" "I do not know," he said honestly. "But I do not think we should count on it." The words hung heavy in the air. Amelia knew what he was saying. If the storm continued, they could be trapped here together for days. The thought should have alarmed her, but instead, she felt a strange sense of calm. There was something about Nathan that made her feel safe, protected. It was a feeling she had not had since her father died. Around midnight, the temperature in the house dropped even further. Amelia was shivering despite sitting right next to the stove, and she could see her breath misting in the air. Nathan noticed and frowned. "The fire is not enough," he said. "This cold is too much. We need to conserve heat." He looked around the small house, assessing. "Is there a smaller room we could close off? Somewhere the heat from the stove could be concentrated." Amelia thought about it. "The bedroom upstairs is tiny. If we moved the stove up there, it might work, but that would be a lot of effort." "Do you have extra blankets?" "Some, yes." "Then here is what we will do. We will push the table and chairs against the walls to make more floor space. Then we will take all the blankets you have and create a sort of nest near the stove. It will not be comfortable, but it will be warmer than trying to heat this whole space." It made sense, and Amelia was too cold to argue. Together, they rearranged the furniture, and then Amelia went upstairs to gather every blanket, quilt, and extra piece of fabric she could find. When she came back down, arms full, Nathan had already spread some blankets on the floor near the stove. They worked together to create a kind of cocoon, using the heavier quilts as a base and the lighter blankets to layer on top. When they were finished, there was a cozy nest just large enough for 2 people, positioned to capture as much heat from the stove as possible. "You take this," Nathan said, gesturing to the makeshift bed. "I will sit in the chair and keep the fire going through the night." "Do not be ridiculous," Amelia said. "You will freeze in that chair. This is big enough for both of us, and we will both be warmer if we share body heat." "It is just practical." Nathan looked deeply uncomfortable with this suggestion, and Amelia felt a rush of affection for his old-fashioned sense of propriety. Here they were, in the middle of a life-threatening blizzard, and he was worried about appearances. "Mr. Parker, I am not suggesting anything improper. I am suggesting that we both survive the night. Now please, get under these blankets before we both freeze to death." He hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded. "If you are sure, I am sure." They settled into the nest of blankets, carefully maintaining a respectful distance between them. Amelia could feel the heat from Nathan's body even with the space between them, could hear his breathing in the quiet of the house. The storm continued to howl outside, but here in their small cocoon she felt safe. "Amelia," Nathan said softly into the darkness, It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it sent a small thrill through her. "Thank you for taking me in, for trusting me. I know it could not have been an easy decision." "Thank you for staying," she replied, "for helping with the cattle, for bringing in the firewood, for not making me face this storm alone." "I am not going anywhere," Nathan said, and there was a weight to the words that made Amelia's heart beat faster. "Not until this storm is over and I know you are safe." They fell silent after that, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that existed between people who understood each other. Amelia found herself drifting off to sleep, warm and secure for the first time in longer than she could remember. She woke sometime in the night to find that she had moved closer to Nathan in her sleep, or perhaps he had moved closer to her. Either way, they were now pressed together, sharing warmth. His arm was around her, and her head was resting on his chest. She knew she should move away, should maintain proper distance, but she was so warm and comfortable that she could not bring herself to do it. Nathan's breathing changed, and she knew he was awake too. For a moment, neither of them moved or spoke. Then his arm tightened slightly around her, a gesture that felt both protective and affectionate. "Is this all right?" he whispered. "Yes," Amelia whispered back. "This is all right." And it was. More than all right. It felt natural, like this was exactly where she was supposed to be. When Amelia woke the next morning, pale light was filtering through the frosted windows. The storm was still raging, though perhaps not quite as violently as the night before. She was alone in the nest of blankets, and for a moment she felt a sharp pang of disappointment. But then she heard movement and looked up to see Nathan at the stove, brewing coffee. "Good morning," he said, smiling when he saw she was awake. "I hope I did not wake you. What time is it?" Amelia asked, struggling to sit up in the tangle of blankets. "About 8, I think. Hard to tell with the storm still going." He poured coffee and brought it to her. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time," Amelia admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what she needed. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some. I kept waking up to feed the fire." He settled back down beside her, his own cup in hand. "The storm is still bad, but I think it may be starting to ease up a little." They sat together, drinking their coffee and listening to the wind. In the daylight, Amelia could see the toll the storm had taken. Snow had drifted up against the windows, blocking the lower half of the glass. The world outside looked like an alien landscape, everything familiar buried under white. "We should check on the animals," Amelia said, though the thought of going out into that cold filled her with dread. "Not yet," Nathan said firmly. "The wind is still too strong. We will give it a few more hours." He was right, of course, but Amelia worried. The cattle would need water, the horses would need hay, and she had no idea if the chickens had survived the night. But there was nothing to be done about it now except wait. They made a simple breakfast from what little food remained, and Nathan rationed the coffee carefully. "We may need to make this last," he said apologetically, "depending on how long this storm keeps up." "I have some supplies in the root cellar," Amelia told him. "Potatoes, some preserved vegetables, a little dried beef, if we can get to it." "Where is it?" "Outside, about 10 feet from the back door, but it will be completely buried by now." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "We will dig it out when the storm eases. For now, we have enough for today at least." The day passed slowly. They played cards using a worn deck Amelia's father had owned, betting imaginary fortunes on each hand. Nathan taught her a game he had learned from a cowboy in Montana, and she taught him one her mother had played. They talked about everything and nothing, their lives before, their hopes for the future, the small details that people share when they have nothing but time. Amelia found herself watching Nathan when she thought he was not looking, studying the way his hands moved as he shuffled cards, The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to her. She had known him less than a day, but it felt like longer. It felt like she had been waiting for him all her life. Around mid-afternoon, the wind finally began to die down. It did not stop completely, but it lessened enough that Nathan felt they could risk a trip to the barn. They bundled up in every piece of warm clothing they could find, and Nathan tied a rope around his waist, the other end secured to the porch post. "If the wind picks up again, I can follow the rope back," he explained. "You stay here where it is warm." "I am coming with you," Amelia insisted. "Those are my animals." They argued about it, but Amelia was stubborn, and Nathan eventually gave in. He tied another rope around her waist, connecting them together, and they ventured out into the white wilderness. The cold hit Amelia like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her eyes water. The snow came up past her knees in some places, and she had to struggle to move forward. Nathan stayed close, one hand on her arm to steady her, and together they fought their way to the barn. Inside, the animals were all alive, huddled together for warmth and looking miserable but healthy. The relief Amelia felt was overwhelming. Nathan immediately set to work breaking the ice in the water trough and distributing hay while Amelia checked each animal individually. "They are all fine," she said, hardly believing their luck. "Cold and hungry, but fine." "They are tough," Nathan said, giving one of the horses an affectionate pat, "just like their owner." They stayed in the barn for about an hour, making sure all the animals were fed and watered and as comfortable as possible. Then they braved the cold again to check the chicken coop. Part of the roof had indeed blown off, just as they had feared, but the chickens had survived by crowding into the most protected corner. Amelia counted them twice to be sure and came up with all 12. "Unbelievable," she said, laughing with relief. "I was so sure we had lost them." "They are stubborn, like someone else I know," Nathan teased, and Amelia felt her cheeks flush despite the cold. They fought their way back to the house, exhausted but triumphant. Once inside, they shed their snow-covered outer layers and huddled by the stove, trying to warm up. "We need to get to that root cellar tomorrow," Nathan said, his teeth chattering. "We are running low on firewood too. Another day or two of this and we will be in real trouble." "I know," Amelia said, "but we will manage. We have made it this far." That night, they settled into their blanket nest again without discussion or awkwardness. It felt natural now, comfortable. They lay facing each other in the dim light of the fire, close enough that Amelia could see the patterns of color in Nathan's blue eyes. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said softly, "Of course." "Why did you never marry? A woman like you, smart and capable and beautiful, you must have had offers." Amelia felt her face grow warm at the compliment. "There was someone once, before my parents died, but he was more interested in the farm than in me. When he realized I would not give up control of the land, he lost interest quickly enough. After that, I decided I was better off alone." "He was a fool," Nathan said quietly, "maybe, or maybe he was just honest about what he wanted." Amelia paused, then gathered her courage. "What about you? Why have you never settled down?" Nathan was quiet for so long that Amelia thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I think I was always looking for something, though I did not know what. A place to belong, maybe. A reason to stay. I have worked dozens of ranches, slept under hundreds of different skies, but none of it ever felt like home." And now, he met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Now, I think maybe I have found what I was looking for." Amelia's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "Nathan, I know it has only been a day," he said, reaching up to gently touch her face. "I know this is crazy, but I feel something here with you that I have never felt before. Like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." "I feel it too," Amelia whispered. "I thought I was content alone, but being with you has shown me how lonely I have actually been." Nathan leaned forward, moving slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Amelia did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, with an intensity that surprised her. When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, she felt something inside her that had been frozen for years begin to thaw. The kiss deepened, grew more urgent. Nathan's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Amelia melted into his embrace. It felt right, perfect, like two pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have presumed. Do not apologize," Amelia said firmly. "I wanted that. I want you." "Amelia, I do not want you to think I am taking advantage of this situation. You have shown me incredible kindness, and I do not want to abuse that." "You are not," Amelia assured him. "Nathan, I am a grown woman. I know my own mind. And what I know is that in one day you have made me feel more alive, more seen and valued than anyone has in years. Maybe this is crazy. Maybe tomorrow the storm will end and you will ride away and I will never see you again. But right now, in this moment, I want to be with you." Nathan searched her face, as if looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Whatever he saw there seemed to reassure him, because he smiled and pulled her close again. "I am not going anywhere," he said, echoing his words from the night before. "Not tomorrow, not ever, if you will have me." They made love there in their nest of blankets by the flickering light of the stove, the storm raging forgotten outside. It was tender and passionate, and everything Amelia had not known she was missing. Afterward they lay tangled together, and Amelia felt a completeness she had never experienced before. "Stay with me," she whispered into the darkness. "Not just until the storm ends. Stay." "Yes," Nathan said simply. "Yes." The storm continued for 2 more days, but Amelia barely noticed. She was too caught up in the wonder of Nathan, in learning everything about him, in sharing everything about herself. They talked for hours, about their childhoods and their dreams, about the farm and what they could do with it together. They made plans, tentative at first and then with growing confidence and excitement. When the sun finally broke through the clouds on the 4th day, revealing a world transformed by snow, they stood on the porch together, Nathan's arm around Amelia's waist. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," Amelia said, surveying the drifts that covered everything. "It will take days to dig out." "We will do it together," Nathan said. "Everything from now on, together," and they did. Over the following weeks, as the snow slowly melted and the world returned to something approaching normal, Nathan and Amelia worked side by side to repair the damage from the storm and prepare the farm for winter. Nathan proved to be everything Amelia could have hoped for in a partner: hardworking, creative, and unfailingly patient. Word spread through Gonzales about the cowboy who had been stranded at the Jenkins farm during the Great Snow of 1883, and how he had decided to stay. There was some gossip, of course, there always was. But when Nathan and Amelia announced their engagement just 3 weeks after the storm, most people seemed to think it was romantic rather than scandalous. They were married in a simple ceremony at the small church in Gonzales on a cold December morning. Amelia wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in the trunk upstairs, and Nathan wore new clothes purchased with money he had saved from his work at the Morrison Ranch. The Morrisons themselves attended, along with most of the town, curious to see the couple whose courtship had become local legend. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said, and when Nathan kissed her, Amelia felt like the luckiest woman in the world. They spent their wedding night in the little farmhouse, in the same room where they had weathered the storm together. But everything felt different now, sanctified and right. Amelia lay in Nathan's arms and thought about how one day, one storm, had changed her entire life. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, stroking her hair. "About how I almost did not let you stay that first night. About how different everything would be if I had made you go to the barn." "You would never have done that," Nathan said confidently. "You are too kind, too good." "Maybe. Or maybe I just recognized what you were from the moment I saw you." "And what was that?" "Mine," Amelia said simply. "You were mine." Nathan laughed and kissed her. "Yes," he agreed. "I was. I always was, I think. I just had to ride through a snowstorm to find you." The winter passed, hard and cold but bearable because they had each other. Nathan's skills complemented Amelia's perfectly. Where she knew the land and the rhythms of the farm, he knew cattle and horses and how to make the most of limited resources. Together, they made the small farm more prosperous than it had ever been. Spring came, and with it new life. The cattle calved successfully, the chickens laid eggs in abundance, and Amelia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with a joy so profound it was almost frightening. "A baby," Nathan said wonderingly, his hand on Amelia's still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Nathan said. "Amelia, you have given me everything I never knew I wanted. A home, a purpose, a family. You have given me a reason to stay in one place for the first time in my life." "You gave me the same," Amelia said. "I thought I was strong enough to do everything alone. But having you here, sharing this life with me, has shown me that strength is not about doing everything yourself. It is about knowing when to accept help, when to let someone in." The summer was hot and long, but neither of them minded. They worked together to expand the house, adding a room for the baby. Nathan proved to be a skilled carpenter, and the new room was solid and well built. Amelia sewed curtains and a quilt for the cradle Nathan had carved by hand during the long evenings. In September, as the summer heat began to fade into autumn coolness, Amelia went into labor. Nathan paced the floor downstairs while the midwife from town attended to Amelia upstairs. It seemed to take forever, and Nathan was nearly out of his mind with worry by the time he finally heard the thin, angry cry of a newborn baby. The midwife appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Parker. A big, healthy boy, and your wife is doing just fine." Nathan took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the bedroom. Amelia was propped up against the pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in the quilt she had made. "Nathan," she said softly, "come meet your son." Nathan approached slowly, almost reverently. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby's small, red face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He looks like you," Amelia said. "He has your eyes." "He has your nose," Nathan countered, "and your stubborn chin, I think." They named him Daniel, after Nathan's father. Daniel Parker, born exactly 9 months after the storm that had brought his parents together. It seemed fitting somehow. Being a father changed Nathan in ways Amelia had not expected. He had always been gentle and kind, but with Daniel, he was positively soft. He would spend hours just holding the baby, talking to him in a low voice about the farm and the horses, and all the things they would do together when Daniel was older. "You are going to spoil him," Amelia said one evening, watching Nathan rock Daniel to sleep. "Impossible," Nathan said. "How can you spoil a child by loving him?" "You cannot," Amelia agreed, moving to stand beside them. "Love them as much as you want." As Daniel grew from a baby into a toddler, the farm continued to prosper. Nathan's reputation as a skilled cattleman spread, and he was able to purchase more livestock. They bought the adjoining 40 acres from a neighbor who was moving east, doubling the size of their property. The little farmhouse was expanded again, growing from 2 rooms to 5. 3 years after Daniel was born, Amelia gave birth to a daughter. They named her Caroline after Amelia's mother, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. Daniel adored his little sister, insisting on helping with everything from feeding her to singing her to sleep. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family, hard days and peaceful evenings. They faced challenges, of course. There were droughts and floods, sick animals and failed crops, accidents and illnesses. But they faced them together, and that made all the difference. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Amelia to the spot where they had first brought the cattle in during the storm. It was a clear December day, cold but bright, and the grass rustled in the breeze. "You remember that night?" Nathan asked, his arm around her waist. "Of course," Amelia said. "How could I forget? That was the night everything changed." "I knew that night," Nathan said. "When we were out here in the snow, working together to get the cattle in. I knew then that I had found what I had been looking for all my life. I just did not realize it yet." "I knew too," Amelia confessed. "Or at least I suspected. You were so capable, so calm in the crisis. And when you insisted on checking the chickens even though it was dangerous, I thought, this is a good man. And when you insisted I stay in the house instead of freezing in the barn, I thought, this is a strong woman who knows her own mind." Nathan turned to face her fully. "Amelia, these past 5 years have been the happiest of my life. You and Daniel and Caroline, this farm, this life we have built together. It is everything I never knew I wanted. It is everything I wanted but thought I would never have," Amelia said, reaching up to cup his face. "That storm brought you to me, Nathan. It was the best thing that ever happened to me." "No," Nathan said, pulling her close. "The best thing was you opening your door and letting me stay. The best thing was you trusting me, choosing me, loving me." They kissed there in the pasture. 5 years of love and partnership and shared dreams in that one embrace. As the years passed, the Parker family continued to grow and thrive. Daniel grew into a tall, serious boy who loved the land as much as his parents did. He could ride before he could read properly, and Nathan taught him everything about cattle and horses and how to read the sky for coming weather. Caroline was smaller but just as fierce, insisting on doing everything her older brother did, and usually succeeding through sheer determination. When Daniel was 8 and Caroline was 5, Amelia found herself pregnant again. This time it was twins, boys they named Andrew and Samuel. The house, which had seemed spacious just a few years before, suddenly felt cramped, and Nathan spent the better part of a year expanding it again, adding a second story with 4 bedrooms. "We are going to need a bigger barn too," he said one evening, surveying their growing herd. "And maybe we should think about hiring some help. This is getting to be too much for just the 2 of us." "3 of us," Daniel corrected. He was 10 now, and he worked alongside his parents every day. "I can do as much as any hand you could hire." Nathan ruffled his son's hair. "I know you can, Daniel, but you should also have time to be a boy, to go to school and play with friends." "I would rather be here," Daniel said firmly. "This is where I belong." Amelia and Nathan exchanged a look over his head, a whole conversation in that one glance. Their son loved the land the way they did. He would carry on what they were building here. They did hire help eventually, 2 young men from town who were good workers and respectful. With their help, the Parker farm became one of the most successful in the area. They raised cattle and horses, grew crops, and Amelia's chickens were famous throughout Gonzales for their eggs. But success never changed Nathan and Amelia. They remained the same hardworking, humble people they had always been. They helped their neighbors when times were tough, donated to the church, and made sure their children understood the value of hard work and kindness. On the 10th anniversary of the storm that had brought them together, a traveling photographer came through Gonzales. Nathan hired him to take a family portrait, something Amelia had always wanted but they had never been able to afford. They gathered in front of the house, Nathan and Amelia in the center with Daniel and Caroline on either side and the twins in front. The photographer arranged them carefully, then disappeared under the black cloth of his camera. "Everyone stay very still," he called out. "Do not move for 10 seconds. Amelia felt Nathan's hand squeeze hers and she squeezed back. She looked at her children, at the house they had built together, at the land stretching out behind them. This was what that storm had given them. This life, this family, this love. The shutter clicked, capturing them all frozen in that moment of perfect happiness. As the children grew older and more independent, Nathan and Amelia found themselves with more time alone together. They took walks in the evening after dinner, talking about their day and their plans for the future. They sat on the porch on Sunday afternoons, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink. "You ever regret it?" Amelia asked one evening as they sat together on the porch swing Nathan had built. "Giving up your traveling life to settle here?" Nathan looked at her in genuine surprise. "Regret it? Amelia, marrying you and building this life together is the best decision I ever made. I never regretted it, not for a single moment. Even when times were hard. When the drought almost killed the herd, or when Daniel broke his arm and we did not know if it would heal right. Especially then," Nathan said firmly. "Because in those hard times, I had you beside me. We faced them together. Before I met you, I was alone, just drifting from place to place with no real purpose. You gave me a purpose. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much," Amelia said softly. "I was so lonely before you came, I did not even realize how lonely until suddenly I was not anymore." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking gently. Then Nathan said, "Do you remember that first night when I said I was not going anywhere? Of course. I meant it even then, I think, even though I had only known you for a few hours. Some part of me recognized that I had found what I had been searching for all my life." "I felt the same," Amelia admitted. "It terrified me, feeling so much so quickly, but I could not deny it." "I am glad you did not," Nathan said, pulling her closer. "I am glad you were brave enough to follow your heart." "We were both brave," Amelia corrected. "You were brave enough to stay, and I was brave enough to let you." Daniel turned 18 in the autumn of 1896, 13 years after that fateful storm. He had grown into a fine young man, tall and broad-shouldered like his father, with his mother's determination and work ethic. He ran most of the farm now, with Nathan and Amelia providing guidance when needed but mostly stepping back to let him learn. Caroline was 15 and already drawing the attention of young men in town, much to Nathan's dismay. She had inherited her mother's beauty and her father's stubbornness, a combination that made her formidable. The twins, Andrew and Samuel, were 10 and inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into the kind of harmless mischief that all young boys did. "We have done well," Nathan said one evening, watching his children at the dinner table. Daniel was telling a story about something that had happened in town, making Caroline laugh while the twins listened with rapt attention. "Look at them. They are happy and healthy and good people. We have done well." "We have," Amelia agreed. She reached over and took his hand. "Thank you, Nathan. For everything. For staying that night, for all the nights since. For being exactly the partner I needed." "Thank you for seeing something worth staying for," Nathan replied. "For being brave enough to trust a stranger in a storm." That night, after the children had gone to bed, Nathan and Amelia lay together in their room, the same room where they had weathered that first storm together all those years ago. The house had grown around it, but this room remained unchanged, a reminder of where they had started. "Do you ever think about that storm?" Nathan asked, his arms around Amelia. "About how different things would be if it had not happened, sometimes," Amelia admitted. "I think about how I almost did not help you with your horses, how I almost told you to just go on your way. And then I think about everything I would have missed. You, our children, this life. It is terrifying how close I came to missing all of this." "But you did not miss it," Nathan said gently. "We found each other just like we were meant to." "You believe that?" "That we were meant to find each other." "I do," Nathan said without hesitation. "I think some people are meant to be together and the universe conspires to make it happen. That storm, my horse throwing a shoe, me deciding to head south instead of west, all of it led me here to you." "Then I am grateful to that storm," Amelia said, "for every frozen, terrifying moment of it, because it brought you to me." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms just as they had that first night. But now they had years of shared history, of love and laughter and tears. They had built something together, something strong and lasting. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Daniel married a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner, and they built a house on the eastern edge of the Parker property. A year later, they gave Nathan and Amelia their first grandchild, a boy they named Nathan Jr. Caroline married at 19 to a schoolteacher who had moved to Gonzales from Houston. Nathan had been skeptical of the educated city boy at first, but William proved to be hardworking and devoted to Caroline, and that was all that mattered. They settled in town, where William taught at the school and Caroline helped him. The twins, always close, both decided to join the army when they turned 18. It nearly broke Amelia's heart to see them go, but she understood. They needed to find their own way in the world, just as Nathan had before he found his way to her. "They will come back," Nathan assured her as they watched the twins ride away. "This land is in their blood, just like it is in Daniel's. They will see the world, have their adventures, and then they will come home." And he was right. 4 years later, both Andrew and Samuel returned, older and wiser and ready to settle down. They both married within a year of each other and built houses on the property, close enough to help with the farm but far enough for privacy. The Parker farm became almost a small community unto itself, with 3 generations living and working together. Nathan and Amelia, now in their 50s, began to step back from the day-to-day operations, letting their sons and daughters-in-law take over the heavy work while they provided advice and helped with the growing number of grandchildren. One winter evening, exactly 20 years after that fateful storm, Nathan found Amelia standing on the porch, looking out at the snow-covered fields. A light snow was falling, nothing like the blizzard that had brought them together, but enough to blanket the world in white. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders and pulling her close. "I am thinking about another snowy night," Amelia said. 20 years ago today when a cowboy showed up at my door asking for shelter. And a stubborn farmer woman would not let him freeze in her barn," Nathan added with a smile. "Best decision I ever made," Amelia said softly. "Second best," Nathan corrected. "The best was when you told me to stay, not just for the night but forever." They stood together, watching the snow fall and listening to the sounds of their family inside the house. Daniel's children were playing some game that involved a lot of running and laughter. Caroline had come for dinner with William and their 2 daughters. The twins and their wives were helping clean up from dinner, their voices floating out through the windows. "We have been blessed," Amelia said. "More than I ever thought possible." "We have been," Nathan agreed. "And it all started with a storm and a woman brave enough to trust a stranger." "And a man who kept his word," Amelia said, turning to look up at him. "You said you were not going anywhere, and you never did. 20 years, Nathan. Through good times and hard times, you have been right here beside me." "Where else would I be?" Nathan asked, cupping her face gently. "You are my home, Amelia. You always have been. From that very first night, I knew I had found where I belonged." They kissed in the falling snow, 20 years of love and devotion in that one embrace. And when they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling, their faces wet with snow and tears and joy. Inside, the family was calling for them to come in, to get warm, to have pie and coffee. But Nathan and Amelia stayed on the porch a moment longer, savoring the quiet and the snow and each other. "Thank you," Amelia said softly, "for staying, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you," Nathan replied, "for opening your door that night, for seeing past the stranger to the man I could be, for loving me back." They went inside together, hand in hand, just as they had faced everything over the past 20 years. The house was warm and full of light and laughter, full of the family they had created together. It was more than Amelia had ever dreamed of that lonely night before the storm, more than Nathan had ever hoped for in all his years of wandering. As they sat down to pie with their children and grandchildren around them, Nathan caught Amelia's eye across the table. She smiled at him, that same smile that had first captured his heart 20 years ago, and he felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. That storm had brought him to her door, cold and desperate and lost, and she had let him in, not just to her house but to her heart. Everything good in his life had flowed from that one moment of trust, that one act of kindness. He reached under the table and found her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. She squeezed back, a wordless communication that they had perfected over 2 decades of marriage. "I love you," the squeeze said. "I am grateful for you. I choose you today and always." The evening wore on, and eventually the family began to head home to their own houses. Daniel kissed his mother goodnight and shook his father's hand, his own sons trailing behind him sleepily. Caroline hugged them both, whispering that she would visit again next week. The twins left together with their wives, their laughter fading as they walked through the snow to their homes. Finally, Nathan and Amelia were alone again in the house that had sheltered their love for 20 years. They went through their nightly routine, banking the fire, checking the doors, turning down the lamps. Then they climbed the stairs to their room, moving with the comfortable ease of long familiarity. As they got ready for bed, Nathan watched Amelia brush out her hair, now threaded with silver. She was as beautiful to him now as she had been at 22, maybe more so because now he knew every expression of her face, every thought behind her eyes. "What are you staring at?" Amelia asked, catching his gaze in the mirror. "The most beautiful woman in the world," Nathan said simply. "My wife, the mother of my children, the love of my life." Amelia blushed, even after 20 years of marriage. "You are a shameless flatterer, Nathan Parker." "I am simply telling the truth, Amelia Parker." They climbed into bed and Nathan pulled Amelia close, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist. It was how they always slept, had slept since that first night in the nest of blankets by the stove. "Nathan," Amelia said softly into the darkness. "Yes, my love." "If you could go back and do it all again, would you change anything?" Nathan thought about it, really thought. He thought about the hard times, the lean years when they had struggled to make ends meet. He thought about the nights he had sat up worrying about sick children or failed crops. He thought about the aches in his bones from years of hard work, the scars from accidents and mishaps. "No," he said finally, "I would not change a single thing, because all of it, the good and the bad, led us here, to this moment, to this life. I would live it all again exactly the same way just to end up right here with you." "Me too," Amelia whispered. "I would not change anything either." They drifted off to sleep like that, warm and safe and loved. Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, covering the world in white. But inside, Nathan and Amelia Parker slept peacefully, surrounded by the life they had built together. One storm-tossed night and 20 years of love ago. The years that followed were kind to Nathan and Amelia. They remained healthy and active well into their 60s, still taking their evening walks and sitting on the porch to watch the sunset. They watched their grandchildren grow, helped where they could, and offered wisdom gained from years of living and loving. Daniel took over as the head of the Parker farm, running it with the same skill and dedication his parents had. He expanded their operations, buying more land and increasing the herd. The Parker name became synonymous with quality cattle throughout Texas. Caroline's husband became the principal of the Gonzales School, and Caroline herself became known for her charity work, organizing aid for families in need and pushing for improvements to the town's infrastructure. She was her mother's daughter, strong and determined and unwilling to accept injustice. The twins, Andrew and Samuel, each found their own niche on the farm. Andrew proved to have a gift with horses, breeding and training some of the finest mounts in the state. Samuel discovered a talent for business, handling the financial side of operations and making sure the farm remained profitable even in difficult years. On their 30th anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration at the main house. There were dozens of people now, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The house that had once seemed so small was bursting at the seams with family. After dinner, Daniel stood up and called for everyone's attention. "I want to say something," he announced. 30 years ago today, a storm brought our father to this farm. Our mother could have turned him away, could have told him to shelter in the barn or keep riding, but she did not. She let him in, and in doing so, she created all of this. He gestured around the room at the assembled family. Every person in this room exists because of a choice our mother made 30 years ago. A choice to be kind, to take a risk, to open her heart. And our father made a choice too. He chose to stay, to build a life here, to love our mother with everything he had. Daniel's voice grew thick with emotion. "I have watched them for my entire life, and I have never once seen them take each other for granted. I have never seen them stop choosing each other, day after day, year after year. They have shown all of us what real love looks like. Not the easy kind that exists only when times are good, but the kind that endures through hardship and struggle and loss." He raised his glass. "To Nathan and Amelia Parker, to 30 years of marriage and a lifetime of love, thank you for showing us the way." Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the toast. Nathan and Amelia stood together, their hands clasped, tears streaming down both their faces. They looked around at their family, at all these people whose existence traced back to one snowy night and one leap of faith. "I have something to say too," Nathan said when the room had quieted down. "When I was a young man, I thought I was searching for adventure, for freedom, for something I could not quite name. I rode from ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long, always restless and unsatisfied. And then a storm brought me to a small farm outside Gonzales, and a beautiful, stubborn woman took me in." He looked at Amelia, his eyes full of love. "That night when I told you I was not going anywhere, I meant it, but I did not fully understand it yet. I did not understand that I had been searching for you all along. You were the adventure I had been seeking, the freedom I had been chasing. You were the something I could not name because I had never experienced it before. You were home. Amelia was crying openly now, and Nathan gently wiped away her tears. 30 years, he continued. 30 years of waking up next to you, of working beside you, of building this life together. And I still feel the way I felt that first night. Like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Like I have finally found what I was looking for. He turned to face the room again. I hope all of you find what Amelia and I found. I hope you find someone who makes you want to stop running, someone who feels like home. And when you find that person, hold on tight. Choose them every day. Love them through the storms and the sunshine. That is the secret to a long and happy life. The celebration continued late into the night, with stories and laughter and music. Nathan and Amelia danced together the way they had at their wedding 30 years ago, moving slowly across the floor while their family watched and smiled. "Are you happy?" Nathan whispered as they danced. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Amelia whispered back. "You?" "Deliriously happy," Nathan said. "Every single day with you is a gift." As the years passed into their 70s, Nathan and Amelia finally began to slow down. Their bodies were not as strong as they once were, their energy not as boundless, but their love for each other never diminished. If anything, it seemed to grow stronger with each passing year. They spent their days quietly now, sitting on the porch and watching their family work the land they had built together. They held hands and shared memories, laughing about old adventures and crying over friends and family who had passed on. "You remember the chickens?" Amelia asked one afternoon. Out of nowhere, Nathan laughed. "Which time? There were so many chicken incidents over the years." "The very first time during the storm, when we thought we had lost them but they survived." "I remember," Nathan said. "You were so worried about them. You counted them 3 times just to be sure." "They were important," Amelia said. "They were part of my livelihood, but you understood that. You never made me feel silly for caring about something as simple as chickens." "Because you cared, so I cared," Nathan said simply. "That is what love is, isn't it? Caring about what the other person cares about, even if it seems small or insignificant to anyone else." "You have always been so good at that," Amelia said softly, "at making me feel heard and valued. Even when we disagreed about something, you always listened to my side. You always treated my opinions as important, because they were important. You were running this farm successfully before I arrived. I was not going to come in and start telling you how to do everything. We were partners from the beginning, equal in every way." Amelia squeezed his hand. "That is why it worked, because we were always partners. We made decisions together, shared the burdens together, celebrated the victories together. It was never your farm or my farm. It was always ours." On a warm spring day in 1913, exactly 30 years after that fateful storm, Nathan woke to find Amelia still sleeping beside him. It was unusual. She was usually up before him, always the early riser. He studied her face, peaceful in sleep, and felt a wave of tenderness so strong it nearly took his breath away. "Amelia," he said softly, touching her shoulder. "Love, it is time to wake up." She stirred and opened her eyes, smiling when she saw him. "Good morning," she said, her voice still thick with sleep. "Have I overslept a little, but it does not matter. How are you feeling?" "Tired," Amelia admitted. "I feel like I could sleep for a week." Nathan frowned, concerned. "Should I fetch the doctor?" "No, no," Amelia said quickly. "I am just tired, that is all. We are getting old, Nathan. We are allowed to be tired." But over the following weeks, Amelia's fatigue grew worse. She struggled to get out of bed in the mornings, had no appetite, and moved slowly and carefully as if afraid of falling. Finally, despite her protests, Nathan sent for the doctor. The diagnosis was not good. Her heart was failing, the doctor said gently. It was simply worn out after 73 years of life. There was nothing to be done except keep her comfortable and let her rest. Nathan refused to accept it at first. Not his Amelia, not his strong, stubborn, beautiful Amelia. She had survived poverty and loss and the hardships of frontier life. She could not be defeated by something as simple as a tired heart. But as the days passed and Amelia grew weaker, he had to face the truth. The woman who had been his partner, his love, his everything for 30 years was dying. The family gathered, filling the house with quiet voices and gentle touches. They took turns sitting with Amelia, holding her hand, sharing memories. She smiled at them all, her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the family she had helped create. But it was Nathan she wanted beside her most. He rarely left her side, sleeping in a chair next to the bed, holding her hand even in his sleep. They had spent 30 years rarely apart. He was not going to start now. One evening, when the house was quiet and they were alone, Amelia stirred and opened her eyes. "Nathan," she whispered. "I am here," he said immediately, moving closer. "I am right here, my love. I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely audible. "Something important, anything, tell me anything." "I am not afraid," Amelia said. "I am not afraid to die, because I have lived such a full, beautiful life. You gave that to me, Nathan. You gave me 30 years of perfect happiness. You gave me children and grandchildren and a love so deep and true that some people never experience it in 100 years. "Amelia, please," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "Please do not leave me. I do not know how to be in this world without you." "You will be fine," Amelia said with certainty. "You will grieve, and that is right and good, but you will be fine because you are strong and because our family needs you. Promise me you will keep living, keep loving them, keep sharing our story." "I promise," Nathan said through his tears. "But Amelia, I do not want to promise. I want you to stay." "I know," she said gently, "but some promises are beyond our power to keep. My body is tired, Nathan. It is time for me to rest." "Then I will rest with you," Nathan said fiercely. "When your time comes, I will be right here beside you, just like I have always been." "I know you will," Amelia said, smiling. "You told me 30 years ago that you were not going anywhere, and you never have. You have been beside me every day through everything. What more could a woman ask for?" She was quiet for a moment, gathering her strength. Then she said, "Do you remember that first night, when we huddled together by the stove and you held me to keep warm?" "Of course I remember. I remember everything about you." "That was when I knew," Amelia said. "That was when I knew I would love you for the rest of my life. The way you held me, so gentle and respectful but also protective. I felt safe for the first time since my parents died. I felt like everything was going to be all right." "It was all right," Nathan said. "We made it all right together." "We did," Amelia agreed. "We built something beautiful, Nathan, something that will last long after we are both gone. Our children, our grandchildren, this farm, it is our legacy." She fell silent, her breathing shallow and labored. Nathan held her hand, willing his strength into her, trying to keep her with him through sheer force of will. "Nathan," she whispered. "Yes, my love, thank you for staying, for choosing me, for 30 perfect years." "Thank you," Nathan whispered back, "for opening your door, for letting me in, for loving me back. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Amelia Jenkins Parker, the very best thing." Amelia smiled, her eyes closing. "Hold me," she asked, her voice barely audible. Nathan climbed carefully into the bed beside her, gathering her gently into his arms just as he had that first night 30 years ago. He held her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest, each beat slower than the last. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Amelia breathed. "Always." And then, with her family in the house around them and her husband's arms around her, Amelia Parker took her last breath and slipped peacefully away. Nathan held her for a long time after she was gone, rocking her gently and crying into her hair. The woman who had taken a chance on a stranger in a storm, who had built a life and a family with him, who had loved him faithfully for 30 years, was gone. But she had been right about one thing. He did keep living. He grieved deeply, more deeply than he had known was possible, but he kept his promise to her. He stayed on the farm, helping where he could and watching their grandchildren grow. He told their story to anyone who would listen, the story of a cowboy and a stubborn farmer and a storm that changed both their lives forever. Nathan Parker lived for another 5 years after Amelia died. He was productive years, full of love and family, but everyone could see that part of him was missing. He had been half of a whole for so long that being alone again was like missing a limb. When Nathan died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, the entire town of Gonzales turned out for his funeral. They buried him next to Amelia in the little cemetery on the hill, overlooking the farm they had built together. On their shared headstone, Daniel had inscribed, "Nathan Parker, 1858–1918, and Amelia Jenkins Parker, 1860–1913. Together, they weathered every storm. The Parker farm continued to thrive under Daniel's stewardship and later under his children and grandchildren. The story of Nathan and Amelia was passed down through the generations, becoming family legend. The great blizzard of 1883, the cowboy who showed up asking for shelter, the farmer who took him in, and how they fell in love in the space of a few storm-tossed days. Every year on the anniversary of that storm, the Parker family would gather at the farmhouse, now much expanded but still recognizably the same building where it all began. They would share the story again, keeping it alive, reminding themselves of where they came from. And sometimes, on quiet winter evenings when snow fell gently over the Texas plains, people swore they could see two figures standing on the old porch. A tall man with his arm around a woman's waist, both of them looking out over the land they had loved and nurtured together. Just the wind and the snow, the practical folks would say. But the romantics knew better. It was Nathan and Amelia still together, still keeping watch over the family they had created, the legacy they had built. Still proving that sometimes, all it takes is one storm, one door opened in kindness, one person brave enough to say, "I am not going anywhere," and mean it forever. Their love story became the foundation upon which 4 generations built their lives. And every single member of the Parker family, from the oldest to the youngest, grew up knowing that they existed because a cowboy stayed through a snowstorm, and a farmer had the courage to let him, because 2 people chose each other in a moment of crisis and kept choosing each other for 30 perfect years. That was the real legacy of Nathan and Amelia Parker. Not the successful farm or the prominent family name, but the example they set of what true partnership looked like. Of what it meant to be equal partners in life, to weather every storm together, to love faithfully and truly until death and beyond. The farm still stands today, over a century after that fateful storm, still in the Parker family, still thriving. And on cold winter nights when the wind howls across the Texas plains, the current generation of Parkers will sometimes pause in their work and think of their ancestors, Nathan and Amelia, who started it all with one act of kindness during a blizzard. They think of a young cowboy who promised, "I am not going anywhere," and kept that promise for the rest of his life. They think of a young woman brave enough to trust a stranger, brave enough to open not just her door but her heart. And they remember that the greatest adventures, the deepest loves, the most meaningful lives, often begin with a simple choice to be kind, to take a chance, to say yes when it would be easier to say no. That is the story of Nathan and Amelia Parker. A story of love born in a storm and lasting a lifetime. A story that reminds us that sometimes the best thing we can do is open our door to someone in need, because we never know when that someone might turn out to be everything we have been searching for all along. And so the story ends where it began, with a snowstorm and a farm and two people who found each other against all odds. But it does not really end, because their love lives on in every descendant who carries their names, their values, their legacy. In every act of kindness, every leap of faith, every time someone chooses love over fear, Nathan and Amelia's story continues, proving that true love never really dies. It just changes form, living on in the hearts and lives of all those it touched.